Hello again, and thanks for joining us for episode 5, where the bad news finally arrives. One of the most famous conventions of Greek tragedy is that murders and deaths and other acts of horror tend to happen off stage. As a result of this, someone invariably needs to come on and tell the chorus, and by extension the audience, what has happened. These reporters come and describe offstage events, often in thrilling detail. The messenger is a very frequent character in Greek drama, and whole books have been written about how playwrights subverted and manipulated the possibilities of reported action. The messenger speech evolved into being a major display of skill for Athenian actors. One of the greatest of these messenger speeches happens to have been written for the Persians. Just at the point where we stopped yesterday, a man dressed in Persian clothing, seemingly out of breath, comes running onto the stage. Never mind Philippides, who ran all the way from Marathon to Athens. This messenger has travelled all the way home from Salamis. Here's Professor Oliver Taplin talking about how impressive this role can be.
It's a powerful role. In a way, the messenger speeches as we know them from later tragedy, from Sophocles and Euripides, are actually rather different because there is an eyewitness coming on and reporting something that's happened during the course of the play. And in this case, there's an eyewitness coming on and reporting something that happened, days or weeks before. But there's the same kind of extraordinary vividness about it. Extraordinary stimulus to the imagination of the audience, their visual imagination, their oral imagination, their atmosphere imagination. So it's a terrific role. I think in later tragedy, quite often the main actor will have acted the messenger. The messenger is a virtuoso role.
Think about it. Telling the stories of these mythological moments, or historical events like this one, to an audience of 10, maybe 15,000 people, with nothing but your voice and your body. Aeschylus has already set us up quite beautifully. We are in the Persian court, and we've met the chorus of old councillors. The queen has arrived, describing the various omens and dreams that are troubling her. And now, at last, the news will arrive. Before we hear from the messenger, there's one issue that we should probably introduce. This is the idea of hubris. Nowadays, it's another word for arrogance. For the Greeks, it was even more specific. It was a transgression against the gods, when a mortal considered himself or herself equal or better than a god, and was invariably punished for it. Think about Arachne, or Niobe, or Tantalus, all punished with savagery for their arrogant notions. Hubris is not punished quite as immediately these days, although we humans certainly haven't lost our taste for arrogant displays of power, wealth, or selfishness. The Persians has at its heart such a display. Xerxes was convinced that he could tame the Hellespont and tame all of Greece, and went brazenly about doing so. Every Greek in the audience knew the result of his campaign, but Aeschylus frames everything very deliberately, and it is Xerxes' hubris that will have to be punished. In casting this messenger, there was no doubt in my mind that it should be played by Caitríona Mhurchú, a terrific actress with whom I shared an office at the Irish Theatre Institute for quite some time. We were both participants of Six in the Attic, where this whole project was born. Caitríona likewise performed some of the text as part of a presentation for the Pan International Theatre Mentorship, and so it's only fitting that this great champion of the piece should play this most extraordinary role. The messenger runs onto the stage in a manner totally opposite to the grandeur of the Queen's entrance. I'm always tempted to think of the exhausted state of long-distance runners when they cross the finish line, although even the greatest Olympians would be hard-pressed to deliver this amazing speech after running for 26 miles.
A gúnfort na háise ile, a hir Persia, a stóras na mór sevdeachta. Tá bhór rathúna scrista déan bhuile marafach a bhain. Tá blá na beirseach titithe agus lár. Hoi mói. Is deacid an rud é bheith a géad teachtara rá nuacht. Ach is mithedam an scéal tabisteach a inseacht ina umláine a fertig. Mar tá an fórsa barbarach go léir lár.
Nobody wants to be the bearer of bad news, but the messenger must be the one to tell us. The entire Persian army has been destroyed. We hear a constant image of the flower of Persia's youth. It's the young men just recently blossomed into manhood that have been mowed down. This first part of the messenger's scene is interesting because the chorus is singing while the messenger is speaking. Perhaps it would strain credulity too much for him to run home from Salamis and then burst into song. The effect is almost chaotic. There's no balance, there's no back and forth. Everything is off-kilter and upset. And here Aeschylus starts to add non-verbal cries of distress. There will be a great many more of these to come. The messenger answers the chorus as they sing in their shock.
Gan áras, mar tá an fórsa fad cailte. Éigean na cheapas go dtucann féin slán a bhaile.
The chorus sings that they regret having lived so long, if it was only to hear such horror. The messenger then insists that he can tell them the truth, because he was there. He is an eyewitness.
Do gnok féin lem chuile cín an domáiste a denig a fersig, agus is féidir lem tuairis go chuirt díomhéid. Ní dúirt sé dart sé a chola ó riine eile.
The chorus laments that it has all been in vain, that they sent their men to Greece for nothing. The messenger gives a haunting image, that the seas at Salamis are full of corpses.
Tá costaí Salamis agus na réigúin má gúird líanta le carpáin na bhar a fuair an bhás. Ó, a Halamis, a ainem uafar le clos. Má bhrón mar le chneadam nuair a chiníam an Athéin.
The grief is almost unbearable, this awful homecoming for the messenger, the sight of these old men distraught at their worst fears coming true. Through all of this, the Queen has stayed silent. She explains, in almost numb horror, that this catastrophe is so bad that she can barely speak, never mind ask how many have been lost.
Is fada mé a host, de warm of Rhone is mé lagha maithag a nuachtú fásach. Mar de bhúlan tabaiste seo chutram mé, go deachar labhairt nó ceiste chur ar an anróg ar gabham mar tríd. Mar sin héin is mithid don cinenne déine chur suas leis na tribhlóidí a chur na déhan ar dró. Crinní de bheabhar agus leabhar, ag méanú na tabaiste amalána, fiú má tán tú ag faoin ag dribhlóidí. Cé tháinig slán, cé na ceannarí is airde réim a chamuid cuine, cé fuair bás agus dága an nonad ag fágant a drúpaigh an ceannara gan ceann.
Quite appropriately, the messenger answers the question that the Queen has been too gracious to ask. She has asked about the army as a whole, about the numbers lost from all her people. But the messenger leads with the only glimmer of good news, that Xerxes himself is not lost.
Maidan Xerxes féin fós, agus fechan sé an solas.
All of this has been set up, allowing us to get our bearings as we listen to the messenger interacting with the chorus and the Queen. She is relieved that the news brings some light to her own house, even in the pitch-black darkness enveloping them all. Now the messenger begins in earnest, listing all of the men who are lost. We heard a similar list when the chorus entered as they reminisced, thinking about the impressive parade of these men heading for Greece. Now we hear some of the same names and many, many more, all of whom have perished. There's quite a flow to this speech, so I won't interrupt it. All you'll hear is the list of names and cities where the men came from. If it's useful, there will be a translation on the website, persiansthepodcast.com.
Tá artan badéis. Canada an 10,000 mar cuioch a smitag I gine costaí crua Salinii. Agus de dácéis an siliarc le buile slea de léim sé go hétram óna long. Agus tenagang den fór is uisle de winter vactria. Tá sé mar haifse Ealaíon Ajax, suite ag tuntracha. Lilaios, agus Arsamis, agus an tríú duine argestis, a dungug lár hallamh chruig in Ealaíon a chohíon colúis. Caileach fear nuachos, córsa strahan na níle Egypte, agus iad siúd hit as an éan long, Arcteas, a devis, agus a dríú duine for resavis. For Metellus ó Chrysabos, Canada an 10,000, agus hánig aharú dathe a éasó gláidir is bui, nuair a bág in na mara corcra, agus Magus an Tarabach, agus Artabís ó Vactria, Canada an 3,000 marcach doracha. De bhog sé go tír cruálach, de bhog sé go dtí tír cruálach áitir úr sé bás. A mistress agus Amphistrius, a helig slá a bhí líanta le pean. Agus Ariomardos úntach a thug brón go dtí Sardos, agus Sesimus ó Vicia, agus Tharabas, Canada na gaige long faoi chuig. Fear dathúil de heilech lirnia. Líon an fear bocht sin ann fuór marmh. Tá rééis críoch úfásach a ollant. Agus Siennesis an fear bachróga, Canara winter Cilicia. An fear is mó a an tribalóid den náid, fuair sé bás glórveis. Sinné an méid Canada a thugam chun mo chuoine. Ach ní insian mo thuairisc se leis ach páirt bheag don staid úfásach.
This catalogue is rich with detail. Aeschylus fills our ears with all of these foreign names of foreign cities. It's a bold move, insisting that the Athenian audience listen for a second time to the list of those they vanquished. We had quite a good time transliterating them and seeing how they might sound in Irish, since there are a good few sounds that we share with Greek. The Queen is stunned, unable to fathom how they can have lost so many in a conflict with this small Greek force. She has to ask how many of them can have been involved.
Aye. An rud atá a chlas agam is barna tabaiste Áwer náire duna ferse agus luúin a géire. Ach fil de inchint agus aber an méid seach lam. Cén méid a vís a chabhla gréagach a thug an tóram dóibh go bhéidir díos búlú leis na Persi I ngaf farige, tre dionga na long.
But the messenger has even more shocking news. The Greeks had only about 300 ships compared with the vast armada of Persia, which actually had 1,000.
Tá me bhéid an chawlig a bheith an scéal ag bra, ba ag na barbarig a bheith an bua. Da bé Ealaíon Umaláin long na ngéigach na tí chéad. Ach bhí 10 dóibh son scartha amach lehélig. Tá gom go cinnte go raibh 1,000 long ag Xerxes, agus go raibh 200 is 10 long acu 4 bhar. Ach faca mis win na figúirí. Ní hawlig a cheapan sibh gur búg orin sa cha ó heh Ealaíon na long de. Ní he. Is dia éigen a lot sin. Trí bhean a scálaí a lódáile mechant choram na cinúna. Cos níon na déthe caithead na ban dé Pallas.
The gods, he says, have saved the city of Pallas Athena. We can imagine that the Athenians would enjoy this nod to their divine patron and their city. The Queen has to ask, is Athens still standing?
Agus cahar na hahéine an bhfuil si fós gan scris.
And here Aeschylus gives another little nod to the audience. Bear in mind, Athens had indeed been ransacked by the Persians, but the city had been evacuated. So, while the truth is that yes, Athens was very badly damaged, Aeschylus gives a more oblique answer. A city consists of its men, not its walls. So as long as Athens still has its men, it is secure. This idea of men is in sharp contrast to the way we hear about Persia, which is now, quite literally, unmanned. Next, we're going to move into the more extended segment of the messenger's speech, in which we hear about how it all came to pass. Again, since part of the impact of these speeches is their momentum and the intricate picture that they create in the mind, I'm not going to stop and start to explain exactly what's going on throughout. We get an extended account of the night before the battle. One of the Greeks has convinced Xerxes that the Greek fleet is planning to flee, and so they spend the night on the alert, patrolling the straits to prevent any such cowardly retreat. Instead, the Greeks eat their dinner and do not move until dawn. We have the sun setting over the Persians, and then the sun rising in the morning for the Greeks. Here's Caitríona now with the story of how the disaster began.
Thosnig an tabaiste Uamáin a bháis dras. Nuair a cheol drospreid nó dia malathe éigen chuoine ó bhaula éigen. Mar tháinig gréige chuoine ó orsanna Héthéine agus duine bhach Xerxes a lehéad seo. Nuair a hiteach darichacht na híthe, ná fanhach na gréigig mar a rábhadar, ach go léimthaéis suas ó na mín sí, agus go sa bháilthaéis an nanam tré hethe fi chéile. Iad go léir I gach tró bail. Tás gnáir hiag Xerxes go raibh an gréigach seo I chuid cléan éid, agus go raibh na déithe ina chuine nuair a chuala sé an méid sin thug do bhach achachs réamh chahada admiréil mar seo a leanas. Chó lua agus a stoppach an ghrian do bheith dó na talún le na ghahanna, agus do dóchach an duidechacht sellh limistáisí na spéire. Bhí artha na lunga ó olahú I drí sre, chun na pasáistí a bhí dul amach go dtí an aige glórach a ghárdáil, agus bhí ar na lunga eile go bhfuil timpeall Ealaíon Ajax agus é a thiorcalú. Dá néalóch na gréigig ó chinúnt ú fásach, agus dá náiróch leo tethe faoi cheilt ó na lunga. Do bí an fínós a bheith ann dá bhadamh féin ná an ceann a bhaint díobh. Sin an méid a dúirt sé, le crí, ma, mór, lán do róchas. Mar níor hiig sé cad a bhí an án dó ag na déithe. Mar sin féin dolamh na gréigig prin na híthe, ní an aon tóirt míord, ach le na gríthe ag géile don údarás, agus cheangil gach marnéalach a bhaide rábha don dola, ach ar a bheras chun rábhíochta. Nuair a heb solas an lé, agus gur tháinig an ihe, chuig gach marnéalach ar bord linge, é ina bhaisteir ar a bhaide rábha féin. Is dhéan gach fearr a bhí ina bhaisteir ar a arm ar a guma chéana. Chléig na bín siú rabhadóirí amach le gártha molta, fan faid na lung, agus dar díadar na siúlta gach duine de réir a ordathe. Siamad captéin na lung an cowlach go léir I glúiseocht fan a híthe, a bog a hawl is a bhus. Bhí an ihe a dul ar ceall, agus fós níor thug na gréigig faoi éon éalú faoi cheilt. Chó lua, agus a líon rairc álainn na maidin, gona capilvána an dáhain, daidig dúis árán dá ratha go háard ó thaobh na ngnéigach, agus láiseach bán do ragart ma calla ard é ó chaidigircha an Ealaíon. Hit an bhá ar na barbarig, mar bhí sé bunós cion ar fad le na rábhadar ar súil. Mar ní ag éalú an éachar a bhí na gréigig agus iad a canna an umhain nuamh seo, ach a brostú chun catha le crógacht agus le muín.
We're going to stop here for the evening, just on the brink of the attack. The lines that follow are the most famous in the play. Perhaps they are the most famous lines from any ancient drama. This messenger speech, as well as being the earliest and one of the most influential, is also the longest, and so we will continue it tomorrow evening. Persians, the podcast, is coming to you as part of Dublin Theatre Festival 2020, and we have 5 more nights to go. It's produced by Maura O'Keeffe, and we are supported by the Arts Council on Comhairle Ealaíon. Tonight you heard Caitríona Mhurchú as the messenger and Marie Mullen as the Queen, Atosa, as well as some expert information from Oliver Taplin. Our signature music is by Mel Mercier, and the show is written and presented by yours truly, Conor Hanratty. It's lovely to see that people are tuning in quite literally from all over the world. Do feel free to get in touch with us on social media via our handle @PersiansDTF, and I'll be back with more tomorrow evening.